Ladies and gents, welcome back. We do this once a week, going over some of the Canadian news with a good friend of mine, Marty Up North. Marty, welcome back. Thanks for joining me again today.
Yeah, welcome back, Clyde. How's your weekend?
It was
Long weekend, July.
It was fantastic. I had a birthday in that time, so that was a lot of fun. And now back to it, but I'm going to be going your way pretty soon. We're going to be heading out to the whole family to check out the Stampede, and we're really looking forward to that.
Yeah, no, you're gonna have fun with the Stampede, and I've already seen on the news, based on hotel bookings, they're thinking that this is going to be a really, really good Stampede, like back to pre-COVID, a night 2018, 2019 kind of Stampede, a good one, a million visitors kind of thing. So it's going to be good.
Nice.
Really good.
Well, I'm really looking.
And the
It's
weather's looking awesome.
My first one, so I'm excited. It's actually not going to be too hot on Friday, which is the day we're actually going to the ground. So that's going to be really good. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's under 15 degrees Celsius right now. So Environment Canada took away the heat warnings. So we're back to a normal summer day.
Right. That's what we've been having out here.
Pride
in
Month
British
is
Columbia.
over. Climate Change Month is over. July is supposed to be back to normal. But as you and I are going to talk about,
oh no,
months in Canada are anything but normal.
Anything but normal.
Anything but normal.
We have some news, and I covered this about the Canada Revenue Agency, and this is I know you were pretty upset about this one, and I know a lot of people are upset about it because we've been hearing lots of stories about corruption in the bureaucracies in our country, and this is a case where it was a bit blatant. There was actually a story where one of the people under a pseudonym called into a radio station and made an admission saying that they had a Facebook group and they were all scamming CERB. The benefit program for the relief program for COVID, and they were saying, oh yeah, they were just collecting it. They weren't even using their VIN number or their SIN numbers, and they were just collecting it because of how loose and easy it was, saying that Canadians got the government they voted for, and now they're all going to pay for it. Now it looks like there's a real investigation. 20 people were fired over this. There was a number of people about 5 months ago that were fired. I think 49 people were fired that time ago. Yep. And there's almost 600 people being investigated. Now, the most frustrating thing about this is even though 49 people 5 months ago were fired for fraud, no police investigation was pursued after this. Now, you could just say your bit there.
Yeah, no. So exactly. So it frustrates me as well on about three fronts, right? The first one, you mentioned CERB. I mean, CERB was for the listeners, it's a Canada COVID emergency relief benefit that was rushed out by the government. It was basically, $2,000 every couple of weeks, and people could have gotten it for, I think, about 12 different periods for about $24,000 or something like that. And we learned after CERB that it was rushed out, but not only rushed out, it was mismanaged and abused. Revenue Canada paid out CERB to inmates, to people that were dead, to people that didn't qualify for it. So I'm mad about that.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't.
People abroad as well. They were sending checks out abroad.
And I'm glad I didn't need it because I still had some income coming in and so forth. But I'm mad about that. But then you find out that within Revenue Canada, it's being abused by their own internal people. That makes me mad. Mm-hmm. And as you pointed out, the person responsible for Revenue Canada, the minister is a lady named a lady from Quebec, Boissonnel or something like that. But everybody who gets their tax return sees Bob Hamilton's signature on the tax return. He's the commissioner of Revenue Canada. He was in front of a committee recently, and he brushed it off. He's like, oh, it's a handful of people. No, it's not a handful of people. It's 600 people being investigated. And like you said, shown absolute mercy because, the worst they're getting is a slap on the wrist and being fired. You and I both know, I mean, we've talked about this on a few occasions before. I do taxes for people, mm-hmm. and Revenue Canada is ruthless, absolutely ruthless, when it comes to battling them. They claim that we have taxpayer rights, and basically they try and say that we're kind of the old innocent until proven guilty. Bullshit. That's not how they work. I mean, if I make a claim and they dispute my claim, they basically put the onus back on me to really prove my claim. and if I don't, then I'm going to be battling them. So it's an organization that I detest, and yeah, now we're finding out that, I mean, for me, the part that I'd like the most of is I want to know how many people did it, and I want repercussions. I think these people they shouldn't just be fired. They should be, it's fraud. It is downright fraud.
Well, that's it. Like when you fill out any government form and you make a declaration of this is your whatever income, or you try to claim a benefit from anything, it says right on the form, if you are lying and we find you to be lying, it's, you know, this much of a fine and this much time in jail for doing this. And to see that bureaucrats,
they'll garnish your wages, they'll do all those things. Absolutely. Yeah. And so you mentioned 600 people. So I looked it up. There's almost 600 or 60,000 people working for the Canada Revenue Agency. So 600 people is 1%. So 1% of the people are being investigated. I'm sure it's more than that. I'm sure it's, you know, it's way more than that who've put in for this fraudulent claim. So, well, we'll see what happens. Well, and here's the other thing that frustrates me too, is that, you know, Bob Hamilton, the commissioner, was basically saying, it's pretty minor and we don't have time to investigate that. So again, it's one of those things, you know, the government has no problem wasting our money, but they never have time to investigate. They don't have time to investigate the CRA. They don't have time to investigate, you know, interference in our elections. They don't have time to investigate billions of dollars that go missing from capital funds. They don't have, like, what's the crisis that finally needs to, you know, that will put the government in a position where they feel that they need to investigate? Like, I'm at a loss for this.
I don't have an answer to that one, because I don't
have an answer, and I'm mad.
You know? It just infuriates us, because we know that even if there was an investigation, it would be like with the likes of you know, their ski buddies and whatnot to run the investigation, because that's what we've been seeing in recent history is no impartiality. So, but
and this segues nicely into something that's happening today, right? Mm-hmm. So this week, I mean, there was two things that happened there's one thing that happened on July 1st. On July 1st, the carbon tax went up.
That's right.
So on the one hand, they take more from us, but then today is July 5th. The whole news, the big thing was Revenue Canada, or the government, proudly saying that, you know, 11 million Canadians qualify for a grocery rebate. So, and the grocery rebate, I don't know what your take is on it, but I've talked about it around the kitchen. We talked about it at the lake this weekend, and I've heard people talk about it. It is one of those events where people are going, enough is enough. Like, stop giving our money away. So if the CERB is getting abused, I guarantee you the grocery rebate is going to be abused. The child dental benefit that was announced a month ago is going to get abused. Everything's just, the government's just giving money away. When in fact, and they completely, absolutely refuse to admit that the reason they need to give money is because on the other side, they're screwing up. I mean, they're imposing taxes on us. Mm-hmm. They're mismanaging the economy to the point where interest rates are going up, inflation is going up, and they're creating problems. And then their solution to the problems that they create is to create another problem by casually giving money to people without.
Well, that's really what it comes down to. So it's the bread part of the bread and circus, right? So they give a bit back to the plebs as you've been taxing them too much, and make them happy. Hopefully that'll make them content. I mean, if they really wanted to make relief for Canadians, they would immediately put a halt to things like the GST tax. They would put a halt to the carbon tax that they've introduced, not adding more to it, and then coming back with a rebate saying, here you go, and then pitting Canadians against Canadians by saying, okay, well, we're going to give a rebate, but not to British Columbia, not to New Brunswick, or whichever arbitrary provinces that they've decided aren't going to get it, and provinces are going to get it. Arbitrarily, they chose that.
Oh my God, we're gonna be careful, Clyde. You're making my blood boil.
well, and this is the thing, God, and I get it.
It is absolutely,
and it's infuriating, because what it does is, again, it's pitting Canadians against Canadians. People are going to get angry at Quebecers because they're getting a 4% discount on the new carbon tax. Instead of everybody saying this carbon tax stinks, they're going to say, I want the 10% instead of 14%, which is a ridiculous thing to say, because we don't want the 10% as it is. Why are we adding more burden on people when at a time we're economically unstable and unable to make ends meet anyway.
And I just want to unpack a couple of things in there. Like you said, there are ways that the government could relieve some of the pressure, such as lowering a tax. Which I live in Alberta, so when Danielle Smith came into power, actually prior to, Danielle said, okay, temporarily, we're going to take off the tax on fuel. So Danielle lowered the road tax by about 14 cents. And then no sooner did she do that the federal government comes around and puts a 14-cent per liter tax on, which is maddening and insulting. So Alberta's trying to manage its own economy and do its own things. And then you got a federal government that abuses us. And then, as you pointed out, I don't know if people know this, but there is a new carbon tax. So it's a new carbon tax that went on July 1st. And this one's convoluted. Like, it's really convoluted, but it's going to get worse. But right now it's not equal across the board. Quebec's the equivalency for Quebec is 10 cents a liter. Alberta's 14 cents a liter. I don't know what you guys are, probably about 14 cents a liter.
Mm-hmm.
So
what I do know though is because it's being charged as a levy before anything goes through on fuel surcharges, the GST or HST, depending on your province, is being added on top of the tax. So this is so you're being taxed, and then they're adding a new tax on top of that tax. And this is it's egregious. It's egregious. And how it doesn't frustrate totally more people is just beyond me.
Actually, one of the last things that I looked at, I left for the weekend. I went home. I went north to the lake, but I got my gas bill, my home natural gas bill. And just before leaving, I should never do these things before I go on vacation, but I ripped it open and looked at my bill, and I went immediately. I went, what the? And my June bill was higher than my May bill. And then you go, oh yeah. The carbon tax increased in April, which didn't affect the gas until May or June. That's on there. And then it's charged on top of the GST, or the GST's charged on top of it. And then here in Alberta, we had a small rebate that applied during the winter months that's gone. So I noticed my bill being higher than May's, and I'm sure everybody else will be in the same boat. So yeah, we're being squeezed, man. We're being very, very squeezed. I noticed, kind of a segue again, but I did notice a lot less traffic on the roads. I mean, I'm this is a road that I'm familiar. I drove north, it's a 4-hour drive, and there was no traffic. And it's not a coincidence. People are not driving. The price of gas is finally, they are succeeding with if their carbon tax is designed to make people stop driving, they're having some success with that. I disagree with the method, but they are having success. People cannot drive. We're $1.49. What are you guys per liter roughly?
Oh, it hovers around 180. It's it's up there.
Oh my god.
It's up there. I'm sure it's gonna break $2 again, which it did last summer. And nobody's looking forward to that. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't have a choice whether they hit the road or not. Many people in the region that I live are commuters, and you got to do it.
And that's the other thing. Some of these taxes and some of these measures that the government are imposing, they really are hurting the lower income person, right? I mean, fuel is an example. Fuel is a perfect example.
Because it's a larger percentage of a low wage income earners.
Exactly. I mean, if I make $60,000 a year and I have to drive 20 kilometers to get to work, and somebody else makes $30,000 a year and has to drive 20 kilometers to get to work,
it's
we have
double.
the same expense to get to work, but for them, it's as a percentage increase, it hurts them a lot. It really does. Yeah. I don't know why people, I mean, you talk to people, I talk to people are starting to finally see the silliness in some circles. I know just as soon as I mentioned it, I'm going to go read the comments tomorrow on your video, and people are going to criticize me saying no, but I think people are starting to see there is a tipping point. People are finally starting to see the insanity of increasing taxes and just giving them a rebate on the other side is well, this is a merry-go-round.
This is, of course, if you're eligible for the rebate. So 11 million Canadians of 40 million Canadians are eligible for this new rebate. Now, this rebate would you would get a grocery rebate, a one-time grocery rebate, if you make less than $32,000 in a year. Now, that doesn't cover a lot of people, especially. I mean, that works out roughly to someone who's a minimum wage earner at $15 an hour.
Yeah.
That isn't a lot of people. You may have young people, single, entry level positions, something like that. But even those people are making more money. You were talking about yourself.
Actually, basically, the rebate is going to now that you mention it, the rebate is basically going to go to people who don't pay taxes. It is what it is. I mean, I've looked at this before many times, right? Like roughly 40% of Canadians don't even pay any income tax, and people can challenge me on this, but it's pretty straightforward,
Now, if it goes to people with disabilities and things like that, I'm okay with that. There's no issue.
I'm okay with that, but that's what I'm saying. It's fun. It's basically going to go to the people who don't pay taxes, which is seniors, very low income people, and people with disabilities.
Yeah, we're not talking about dual income, small family with kids. We're not talking about that. They likely won't be eligible for it. Now, they will be eligible for this new child benefit, which isn't new. It's hard for the Trudeau government to take credit for that. They're just putting an increase on it as it stood before. So here we are, just increasing benefits rather than what most people would argue you should just go the other way and reduce the taxes, and that burden would be immediate and it would be long lasting. It wouldn't be a small token that would go away in a month and would be expensive to implement.
And there's a shortage of labor in the country. I mean, every time I listen to a talk show, that's all we talk about, the shortage of labor. So we need to provide incentives for people to work, and we're doing the opposite. I mean, we need to get people working, people paying taxes. I mean, I've always said our government would rather have two people each paying $10,000 in taxes versus three people each paying $6,000 in taxes. It's frustrating because there's such a huge labor shortage everywhere, but people have no incentive to go work. Like we really are heading towards that.
But it's not like a lot of jobs are great jobs. I mean, we have a lot of people coming from foreign countries. They can't work in the industry that they've trained for in their foreign country, and they end up driving Uber cars and can't afford our real estate prices, and they're disappointed.
Which you and I are back to what we've talked so many times. Let's solve real problems. Let's get to the root cause of those problems, right? Yeah, I keep hearing that. I mean, we're letting in 1 million people who come in, and I'm sure they're skilled. I mean, if you're a doctor in South Africa, or if you can be a doctor in almost anywhere else in the world, why can't you be a doctor here? So some of the rules that prevent people from being doctors or lawyers or nurses or carpenters, let's get to those root causes and then kickstart the economy. I mean, we need, I know here in Alberta, we talk about it all the time. We need 80,000 people in trades. We need carpenters, we need welders, electricians, all those people. And we're not talking rocket science. They're just not available.
They're just not available.
And then it compounds the problem. I mean, the government, how many times have I heard the government saying, we're going to, that they want to work on the housing crisis? Well, the housing crisis is very simple. It's a supply and demand thing. So if the prices of houses are unaffordable, then all we need to do is increase the supply while sort of maintaining the demand. We can't increase the supply. Every time they talk about increasing the supply, they're making the cost of materials more expensive, and there's no labor. There's nobody. There's every work site around Calgary. You're flying here this week and you're going down south. I know you're staying somewhere down south. You're going to go through neighborhoods where there's massive construction. I could walk on any one of those sites if I have a modicum of skills, and I'll get hired by somebody right now.
Oh, absolutely. Well, then there's a red tape issue as well. There's so many people that are in the housing market that have a vested interest in making sure that there's not a lot of new houses hit the market, because they don't want what they own to go down in price and lose the equity in what they've invested in. So, I mean, there's a lot of pressure in that whole market. And we could talk about this for hours, I'm sure.
I hope we get a government someday that solves problems, because this government is creating problems. I mean, that's, it is, as another example, a great segue. We talked about it last week. I mean, C-18, It's the government created a massive problem. And
well, this time with a problem for themselves, which is
they created a problem for themselves.
Yeah.
I mean,
which is amazing.
And they didn't solve. They thought that the best way to get somebody to pay for the CBC and other medias would be to charge Facebook and Meta and others, and they said no. And I just learned today, that this exact C-18, the way it's written, was almost word for word what Australia tried to do 2 years ago. So Australia tried to do the same thing 2 years ago,
and it failed.
And in Australia, it completely failed. And Australia had an even better chance than we had at perhaps making it work, because within the Australian framework, Facebook and Google would have been allowed to negotiate side deals with whoever they wanted to. Whereas here, I think that's what Google doesn't like, is that Google was told this is what's going to happen, and if you want to make a deal with the CBC or Global or whoever, you have to go through the CRTC. And so Google said no. Did you see Trudeau speaking about this one today?
No, I didn't see it. You were telling me about that before we went live, but Pablo Rodriguez, he made an announcement saying that they had decided to take the necessary steps of suspending all government of Canada ads on Facebook. As if
yes,
that's
thank you. Finally, the government's not going to spend. Wow, hey.
They're not going to spend money on something, but that money will just go to something else. You know that if they eliminate a budget, well, then the next year they'll have to fight for that budget to go back.
Oh yeah, I'm sure the Google executives are like, "Ooh, we just lost $1 million of advertising with the Canadian government." Yeah, they're not shaking.
Yeah, one thing I've been mentioning on this is there's a precedent here, right? Say if Google was to bend the knee to the Canadian government and say, okay, we'll pay for no reason. We'll pay for people to use links for your CBC and the state propaganda or the other outlets that you deem as the media. The government decides is the media. If that were to happen, then all around the world you'd have media agencies lobbying their government to create a law to do the same thing so that they can get a payday too. Now, if you think about it,
California is already doing it.
Well, Pablo Rodriguez.
There are people watching.
Well, hear this. Pablo Rodriguez had made the point in an article to CTV to say that if it was to go through, they would make $300 million in 2023 after it takes place. Now, if you just took the demographics of Canada, times it by 10, there's the United States. Are you suggesting that Google is gonna and Facebook and all these companies are gonna pay to the tune of $3 billion to the United States government to dole out to these media agencies, and then every other country around the world jump on this
$3 billion
thing?
in Australia,
they would be insolvent.
In the US.
They'd be insolvent in a day, right? It just would not happen. You can't get blood from a stone, and that's exactly what they're trying to do here.
And in that speech that I just mentioned, where so tell your, maybe find it later and put a link for your viewers. But so Trudeau was asked about the backlash and the resistance to Bill C-18, and then he just went on to a 90 seconds of typical Trudeau platitudes and contradictions. So, watch that video, because he's constantly contradicting himself, saying, we believe in a free media. Then he talks about it needs to be paid for. We believe in democracy and freedom of choice, but no, we want to impose restrictions. A cornerstone of democracy is a free market, but he just goes on and on and on.
We got to regulate the market and all of that stuff. Yeah. I mean, I've said it many times. The first thing to be bought and sold when you regulate a market is the regulators. And that's what the CRTC is. It's a group of individuals that are, their job in being able to pick who the state media or who trusted media sources are, is being given the award of picking winners and losers in the marketplace. And I'm so glad that this one blew up in their face. I'm so glad about it, because maybe it'll be a lesson to administrations moving forward in other countries not to.
They have about 5 months to try and fix it, I guess, because even though it passed, some of the provisions don't become effective until whatever January 1st. So they got time to try and smooth things over. But right now it does look like Facebook more than Google. Meta, I guess Meta is saying no. Like Meta is digging in their heels for the reason you mentioned, because they can see the writing on the wall. They don't want to be this is Canada is still a significant market for them, but it is a small market compared to the US and Europe and everywhere else. So they're going to fight this one. I have a feeling if I had my bet is Pablo's going to back off on this one. That's my bet.
Yeah, well, I think the bill will have to be reversed in order, like it needs to be removed in order for this to work, because Google in their statement, they quote they called it unworkable. It's just their legislation itself is unworkable. So they're gonna have to back off on this one, or else it'll be a stalemate. They'll lose their entire media apparatus or control over the media in Canada. Anyway, now I wanted to get into before we end any of this, and I'd like to get into this and have a bit of time to talk about this. And this is the new lawsuit that Eva Chipiuk is bringing forward, and we have an individual. She's come forward, Carrie. And she's suing the government of Canada. She's suing several different agencies in the government, and she's also suing the CBC for the injury that she sustained because of the vaccine that she took. She took AstraZeneca, and then when that was no longer available for the second dose, she took the Pfizer vaccine. Now She's suing because
what's it called? Bell's palsy.
Permanent damage. She'll have to deal with this for the rest of her life. So she's bringing forward a lawsuit to go after all these different agencies, and the claim is that although they knew, and court documents have come out since stating that they knew the contrary, they had been saying over and over again, telling people that this was safe and effective, and there was no reason to worry about it. And hindsight's 2020, but they had the information at the time, and this is what's triggered the lawsuit.
Yeah. I mean, they wouldn't have had a lot of information, but any information. That's my opinion. I mean, the vaccine are so new, so we wouldn't have known long-term effects, but they would have had, if they knew something. Then I think then they are liable. They knew stuff. I know they knew stuff, but I mean, even on a higher level, I mean, we saw,
Well, even if they didn't know, then it would be unethical to come out and call it safe and effective. Correct?
I think we go further that way. I mean, she's taken Eva is the one responsible for the lawsuit, so that's good, and she knows what she's doing. I mean, because she's going after the government, and she's going after who exactly in the government. I guess she's going after Health Canada. What I'm surprised is she's not actually going after AstraZeneca or any of the drug manufacturers.
No.
But that's all intentional. So her goal is to get some compensation for her client, so she's going to pick a strategy. But I think over time, this is just one of many lawsuits that are going to be like this. We're going to see more and more and more. People are going to go after the government. For all we know, Eva probably talked to other lawyers who are also, they'll divide and conquer. Somebody else will take a different approach, and we'll find a client who wants to go after the drug manufacturer. Somebody will go after the doctors themselves, because I'm surprised nobody's gone after individual doctors. I mean, there's so much negligence that occurred. Yeah, the government rushed out to buy it quickly. It wasn't tested properly. The media jumped on board to promote something without knowing what they were promoting. Doctors jumped on board. This is just the tip of the iceberg. I think we're going to see lawsuits like this. I mean, there's another one that was brought forward just this week on behalf of 300 Canadian Forces soldiers, also brought a lawsuit. I haven't seen the details of who they're going after. I think they're going after the Department of Defense.
That's correct. Yeah, they're going after them for the mandate and for things that they've suffered because of it.
And then I've talked about this quite a bit. I mean, the insurance companies, like people say that some of this is being hidden or suppressed. I know it's being suppressed. For instance, I've requested information from the from the Alberta government on vaccine injuries, and it's being suppressed. But ultimately, a group that always comes on top, to the rescue is the insurance companies. When the insurance companies are suddenly faced with, like, that lady maybe even had insurance, so if she has insurance, then the insurance company has to provide care for her, whatever the description is, and they're the ones who will end up charging the government and starting a whole bunch of lawsuits. So I think we're going to see all sorts of lawsuits like this, because the insurance company won't hide this. They if they look to if they well it's the insurance companies that save that went after big tobacco, ultimately, if you think about it, right? I mean,
Yep.
when people so it's what's going to happen here. I think this is just the first. That's a big lawsuit.
Well, the hope here is that more people will come forward, and I'm sure anyone who is liable in these cases and may get sued is hoping for time to pass by, because there are statutes of limitations on all of this stuff. So the encouragement here is anybody who feels that maybe they'd have a case to contact a lawyer and see.
And when you get, when you spoke to Eva and the lady, I can't remember her name, and then I saw lots of comments being asked of Eva, like, why is she not doing it as a class action lawsuit? She had a couple of reasons, but I think ultimately there's strategically one big giant class action versus a whole bunch of smaller ones. There's something there. So I have a feeling there were many. Eva had good reasons for not going down the class action lawsuit, and well, time will tell. It's going to be boy, she's a busy lady, Eva. Good for her. Good for her.
Yeah, good for her. And she's really fighting for good causes, rather than just sticking up for, well, trying to get, go for the big payday.
I mean, just, I know we're running out of time, but it's somewhat related to this. Just this week, I can't remember which organization, but there is other data, like the life expectancy of Canadians dropped during COVID. So it's the first time in about 20 years, 30 years. Well, I'd say it's the first time in my lifetime that Canadians' life expectancy actually dropped. So, when I was born, my life expectancy was, I don't know, 78 years old or whatever. And somebody born 3 years ago was born with a life expectancy of 82. Well, somebody born today, this year, has a life expectancy of like 79. So there's been a drop in life expectancy in Canada and around the world. And it's related to what? I don't know. I mean, I have a pretty good idea of what it's related to.
Well, and I got to do the disclaimer: we're not doctors and we're not lawyers, we're not giving any medical or financial or legal advice at all.
We're just reporting stats.
That's correct, and that's where we stand here. But before we leave this, I wanted to ask you a bit about the Conservative makeover. This is a thing that the Conservatives tend to do when they're shifting their focus from, okay, now we've made our base, we've got what's going on, and we may be heading into election territory, and we gotta ramp things up and make things more appealing for those liberals and NDPs possibly coming over, switching sides and voting for us. And what do you think?
I don't like it because, even though I'm a conservative, I don't like it. I've seen liberals do it. I think was Bob Rae in Ontario a liberal? Bob Rae was one of those guys, right? Get rid of the glasses, Bob, and get the contact lenses. And as somebody who's on the other side of the fence, you know what they're doing. So I don't know why the Pierre's advisors are doing that. It's not going to fool the liberals, and it's not going to fool the conservatives. I think we're too sophisticated in this era, and it's too obvious. If they had done it maybe casually, sure. But poor Pierre. I mean, he wakes up this morning. He's not wearing glasses anymore. He looks like he's squinting, having a hard time, and then his hair's not gelled back. So, let's and you and I, look at us. I have a bias.
Yeah, I got a bias.
People with glasses look smarter, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I trust people people with glasses look smarter. People with beards are probably less likely to give you bullshit, and because that's the other thing. Like, that's something else, right? There's a rule in politics that you should be clean shaven. And if you look at a couple of the guys who do sport beards, the only one who sported a beard that kind of came across that suited him was Mulcair. Mulcair had a beard, right?
Well, the first one that comes to mind is Pablo Rodriguez, and he's slimy.
He looks slimy with his beard, and the environment minister there, what's his name?
Guilbeault, Guilbeault.
Guilbeault, the terrorist. Yeah, he looks evil. So, yeah, one reason I'll never run for politics. I ain't shaving this off. No way, Jose.
No kidding. Well, I hope Pierre goes back to his Poindexter look, because it looks more fiscally responsible. But I guess that's not what liberal voters are looking for. Well, they weren't at least in the last two elections. That's for sure.
I guess I'll put a dig in against liberal voters. I guess liberal voters go for looks, so we're trying to. That's the other reason I don't like it. So yes, liberal voters go for looks, so they voted for Trudeau. And I always like to think that conservative voters are a lot smarter than that. We don't go for looks, and I guess that's my closing comment on that one. Pierre, you're a smart man. You're well spoken, and you're doing a great job. And don't try and attract people with don't try and attract a voter who goes for looks. Keep doing what you're doing and attract the voters that go for somebody with brains.
Yeah, that's for sure.
But I'm not the consultant, so nah.
Well, we can always hope, because Trudeau's looks are fading fast. It looks like all that stress is catching up to him, and people with bad ideas tend to end up looking like their ideas over time, I suppose. Anyway, we'll end it on that one. Marty, thank you so much for joining me and having this discussion. This is a wild week this week. We're going to
see you in a couple of days. Looking forward to it. You're coming to Calgary. We're going to hook up on Saturday, have some beers. You do drink beer, right?
Oh, of course. I got some other drinks that maybe I'll introduce you to if we can get a hold of some stuff. Lots of fun. Good. Looking forward to it. And tell everybody where they can find you on the internet.
Two places: Marty Up North on Twitter and Marty Up North on Facebook, or on YouTube. Geez, I almost said we spoke about Facebook so much. No,
I'm not even on there.
I'm on YouTube and
Twitter.
That's YouTube and Twitter.
Links in the description, as always. All right.
Cheers.
Next time.
Good one.